Welcome to Rowe Galleries. I'm Adam Justice, the Director of the Galleries here at the College of Art and Architecture, and we are so excited to be working with the phenomenal Renee Cloud, who is a local Charlotte artist. She's a Goodyear Arts Collective artist. The exhibition is called Not Another Word, and after saying that, I want to correct myself immediately and be clear that this is not an exhibition, but this is an experience. This is an installation. And so Renee designed the space for this show, and she worked with the gallery staff to create the experience that you really have to walk into and become immersed in, because the whole space is one cohesive work of art. So we are going to interview Renee just a few minutes, take a little walk through around the gallery and the experience. And then Renee is going to start a live painting that will be a mural that will be a part of the experience. And she'll also answer some questions along the way.
I set out to make this body of work that kind of relates to the themes of 2020, which have been, stress, obviously, introspection, just the need for connection or the desire for connection, and then also learning to live in solitude. And I feel like there's been this emphasis on everyone just really getting to know who they are in this time, which is, great, but it can also be isolating. So the thought behind this body of work is to remind you that even though internally there's a lot going on, you're also not the only one experiencing a lot going on. So we can do a little walkthrough of some of the work. They don't have titles yet. I just kind of saved titles for the very absolute last. This piece is probably the focal point of the show. This piece is a combination of, the idea expressed behind it is the idea of taking input stimuli and how I take that input stimuli and formulate it into products. As a whole, it is one piece. As individuals, there are pieces within it that I would call finished, but I always like to think of things as parts of other things. So I never necessarily bog myself down with the idea of this idea is this final product. It's really interesting. I had the idea when I walked into the space. It was brand new. I had something completely different planned for it, but ultimately made this decision, and it was a lot of work, and it was something that I had never done before. It was something that I hadn't even physically sketched out. It was just one of those, I'm going to bet it all on this idea, and I'm going to figure out how to make it happen. And there were moments where it was like, oh, what did I do? But, you just got to problem solve through that, and you get to a happy place. So we'll look at this one. Okay, perfect. This piece was made in collaboration with the Tile Lab. It is a neon pink CNC routed full piece of plywood. The logic, the thought behind it was kind of considering, maybe it's protest art, I don't know, I'm not sure yet, but considering all the plywood that's going up over windows and to protect storefronts and things of that nature from the outcry of people and the civil unrest, what's going to happen after all this is done. So it's kind of an aggressive piece, but a subtly aggressive piece, and you kind of just have to experience it in person. It has such a different feel, and I don't normally make things this large, so this is a new experience for me to make something so big and so very, very pink. I don't know. So form and function, right? I like the idea of using what it is. Let's be honest about what it is. Let's not doll it up in any way. And I've always loved the way work looks sitting on cinder blocks, because it's kind of the opposite of what you expect in a gallery. It solves the problem, right? It's not on the floor anymore, and we used this reusable material that has been, maybe is experiencing like this weird sort of the idea of throwing bricks through windows and things of that nature, which is why you would need the plywood to build it up afterwards. So maybe there's a subconscious connection there. I don't know. I've always loved cinder blocks, and I've always loved the way they work sitting on cinder blocks, and this seems like the perfect piece for it because it's a big piece visually, and cinder blocks are big in mass, so they kind of balance each other out. That's my thought there. So this wall is what I will be working on today. It's going to be a language piece inside a language piece, so it's going to get this really cool treatment of language on top. The vinyl will disappear at the completion, so it's acting as a resist. So there will be legibility among the illegible, we'll say. I have not attempted this method before, but it's just really submitting myself to the idea of we gonna figure this out as we're working on it, because there is a vision in my head, but it's not necessarily like super concrete. I'm just gonna work through it and make adjustments as I go. Submit myself to the process of learning what happens when these things occur and how do I work around those situations. I think a lot of my work is about problem solving. I think I'm really, really interested in creating these issues for myself to work around and figure out. And usually it's chasing in that. I'm chasing the concept to the finish point. I'm trying to figure out how to make this thing exist. And it's not so much like the thing that I'm after, it's the path to the thing. And I think that's for me, a really fun way to think about making work, because it's not so much I'm not super interested in craftsmanship when I'm chasing an idea. I'm not super interested in final appearance. I'm just trying to figure out how do I learn to get to here through all the mess that I'm about to make. And it's just, again, it's submitting to the process. You just have to surrender yourself to whatever is going to happen, and you learn to work around it. I don't usually sketch out my ideas. I kind of keep it all in my head, so I can keep working on it and mulling it over and mulling it over and mulling it over. Because I feel like once I put it on paper, that's some committal to the idea that I had at the time. And to keep revising the idea in a sketchbook, to me just takes away some of the fluidity of the thought around a piece. But I do realize I need to be writing some stuff down so I don't forget. But yeah, so that's what I'm going to work on today while we chat and have questions. And then I should talk about the windows. I have a set of twin windows. It is what it is, and it will be what it would be. Are on these two.
Sorry.
No, it's close enough. Are on these two opposing windows. Also in pink. I think, it's about surrender again, right? But someone recently said it is what it is, about a situation in which it could have been different. So I'm wondering what implications that language now has as is it a surrender or is it a give up statement? And on the inverse, it will be what it will be. It's the same idea with the passive voice, right? It will be whatever you will it to be. I don't know. So there's some thoughts connecting those two bits of language, and also I've learned over quarantine that I love staring out windows. So why not look at art while staring out the window? This collection over here is actually probably more familiar to me. I've been working with mirrors a lot recently because I'm interested in the reflective surface, and I'm interested in forcing you, the viewer, to look at yourself looking at the art and understand that maybe it formed more of a connection with you while looking at it. So this is a set of 4 mirrors: Serenity, Accept, Courage, Wisdom, taken from the not remember the name of the prayer book, but God grant me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. They're encased in these pink, like oversized tombstones to kind of frame the body within the language. So really to like center the idea of this being something that you reflect on yourself. So like reflect acceptance, reflect serenity, reflect courage, reflect wisdom. All things that we need to get through, in my opinion, to get through this crazy, crazy time. So like this is really like a personal piece to kind of like ground yourself in front of and just let it be experienced. Like you reflect within yourself on these ideas is what I think. Or you look at yourself, check your mirror, check your makeup, make sure everything looks good. I like mirrors because they are you, right? Like they're this portal to you when you look in them, or this portal to whatever it reflects. And that's always been super interesting to me. And that's, oh, can I make it outside?
Yeah.
We can make it outside. So outside is a collection of 140 squares. This is a revival of my out of context piece. So all of these writings are done, some free writes, some in response to current events in the news, some while watching some trash TV and other relationship shows. They were cut down into these individual squares, and you, the viewer, whenever the space is activated with people, are invited to take one with you out of the context of this gallery to contemplate, what is the meaning of this piece of paper. On the wall, it's presented to you as art, but when you take it down off the wall and walk away with it, is it still art? Is it still part of this art, or is it now its own individual art, or is it a note card, or is it just a piece of paper? All of these questions are for you to answer. And so the shape of it will change over time as people trickle through and take whichever square they want. And so it'll slowly or quickly, we don't know, but it will deteriorate off the wall. And so it's something you can kind of, come by and check on and see how it's changed from the morning to the evening and from Monday to Friday. See the changes in that piece. And so that's the show. I think that's everything. I think I rambled for a really long time, didn't I?
No, just long enough.
Just long enough? Sweet. We did it. So let's go.
Hang a little bit.
Yeah, let's go figure out some art and answer some questions. We have questions. So I had a strategy thought for this. So basically, I'm filling this entire big rectangle with pink braiding. And I take on these lines as a thought of breaking up the handwriting, so there won't be like blue stripes, or not blue stripes, there won't be like stripes of gray exactly running through it. It's just giving me space to break up my hand. So we're going to see how this works. And I'm just going to pick this way, but I'm just going to do it.
Do it.
And just not cry. And just not cry over here. Sorry, I got you. So I was not anticipating such drift.
You want a rag?
Yes, that would be awesome.
Is there something in here downstairs?
Find just anything.
gosh, you know what, I don't mind them.
Change your mind?
Yep, that
Okay.
quickly.
All right. Yeah, I think it'll activate the masking tape
Yeah,
lines.
it'll force me to do it. Though.
So, I have a question.
Yeah,
So the big white letters are, they're stuck to the wall as vinyl.
yes,
And so they're, like you said, they're basically like resists. And so once you're finished, those will be peeled off
Mhm.
and you'll have the negative space.
Yep.
Will become the message.
yes.
So does that change things? I mean, changing script or words from the positive space to the negative space?
That's not, yeah. I mean, yes, absolutely. I haven't really thought about it in the context of this, but I think, taking this now, this would be a negative space. And the negative space is the question, what are you willing to do? And so maybe the suggestion is, how do you fill this negative space with your actions? That's off the cuff, but I don't know. Positive and negative space to me is like, neither one of them is good or bad. They're both neutrals to me. And so like, in thinking of the word negative and positive, like how does that reflect on what I'm doing in the space? I just treat them as like visual languages. Like, is it more of this or more of that? Because
So you don't see them as two polar opposites of being
No.
full or empty?
yeah, no, I don't see them as that at all. I just see them as the greater presence of one or the absence of the other. And that like, there's a time and a place for both or either or.
Which, I mean, you can be said of text too, and
Yeah.
of language.
Yeah, there's a time and a place for all of this to exist.
And none of it's really full or empty.
Yeah.
It depends on your perceptions, it depends on the
100%,
context.
100%. A lot of my work is about presenting an opportunity for, again, reflection, but like to think about it. Like I'm saying these things through this work, not necessarily saying that I'm right or wrong or like that it's an absolute thing. I'm just saying it. And, if you think about it for 20 minutes, I'm successful in my work. If you think about it for 5 minutes, I'm successful. If you completely ignore it, I still consider that success because that's a choice you make in terms of like the level of investigation you're willing to give to something you've encountered. I just like the thought of making work that makes people think. Really, like that's really it. I think it's so cool that we have brains and intelligence and intellect and this ability to ponder, whatever ideas float through our little skulls. And yeah, and I love the thought that I should encourage people to use it. So I'm going to make these things that I have to think through for them to exist. And then the product of them existing is allowing other people to think through other things. That sounds so cheesy when I say that.
No, it's great, yeah.
But I mean,
It's great, it's really awesome to watch you think through it.
yeah.
I mean, and like you were saying earlier about how you're so process oriented. I mean, I think also
Yes.
that goes for mentally too, because while you're doing this, you're constantly thinking through it and evaluating what you're thinking about and whether or not, what you're doing
I have
is
a
kind of,
hyper brain.
yeah.
I have a hyper brain and it's taken me a while to hone it into something that it's good at. Like I was telling you earlier, I think, this entire show is installation work. And I've always had an affinity for installation work, and I've always had a love for solving the problem of getting the work on the wall for people to see it. So now I realize that I think the love of that part of the chase is evolving now to be the work itself. So like there's two layers to everything, right? Like it's the art of getting it on the wall and the art that exists on the wall. And I think, I'm probably for the future going to be studying that balance. Like is the work itself more important, or is the labor that goes into getting the work seen more important? So that's just what I'm going to yo-yo with for the foreseeable future. That's what this show has given me. The new question is, does it go on the wall easy or does it go on the wall hard? And why does it go on the wall hard? And how does it go on the wall hard? Okay, cool. So let's make this happen. I'm excited. I'm excited. I'm excited and terrified. I'm terrified to move this tape. Look at that drama though. Any questions, Eric?
Yes, I have lots of questions from the project class for you. I was just checking our audio and making sure everything was coming through. So one of the students was asking, do you ever get questioned about your work as it relates to current events such as Black Lives Matter or any other social justice movement? Do you find that news, social media influence your artwork, or do you start to see or start to kind of just take things in and see what happens? I think you kind of already talked a little bit about that. But.
Yeah, so my work is always going to have to be perceived in the context of the time it's being made in, right?
Yes. Or take the tape. Got it.
It's all over it.
That's it. I like things.
My work is always going to be viewed in the context of the time that it's made, right? And it's always going to be viewed, this is something that I've had to come to terms with in recent years. Like, it's always going to be viewed through the lens of my Blackness, because it's from a Black hand. And so, I mean, in undergrad, I struggled with that a lot, making peace with the fact that it's always going to be Black art, which is problematic, but for the time being, I understand that my place in the art world, or my responsibility in the art world, is to elevate the conversations being had in the Black community around brutality, around just civil rights, injustice, racism, all that fun stuff. So a lot of my work is about it, and a lot of my work, I think, gets around the idea without being super direct. I like to be as subtle as I can sometimes, just to like hint at, you know, the greater message and really invite you to find the reason to think about the bigger message. I feel like if you spoon feed everything, it just, no one's going to hear it, right? Like, if I give it to you face value every time, you're going to get bored of me giving it to you. So to make you look for this opportunity to think about how police brutality is a mess, or to think about how it has just been really, really hard for people of color in this country for a very, very long time. If I can just get that little nugget of an idea in your head, then maybe it'll open the door for a greater introspection. I forgot the rest of the question, but I feel like I made it through that.
Yep. No, that's great.
Cool.
There was a question too, a student just wrote in about the choice of pink and magenta.
Yeah.
What does that have a particular inspiration or reference?
So pink is my anxiety color. When Adam talked to me about the show initially, I was like, yeah, I'm totally into this. I'm totally into this. I like where this is going. And then Corona hit, and so things were taking a pause for me in terms of like, what am I doing? What's on the schedule? What's on the calendar? And then, you know, we came back to it once things started to clear up. And I walk into the space and I'm like, oh yeah, so it's going to be a pink show because I am very anxious right now. Just in general, like just existing right now is very, very hard for me and lots of other people. This is not like, I'm not special. We're all stressed out. So pink is my anxiety color. And generally when I'm gravitating towards like this neon pink or any sort of pink, like I start to make aesthetic choices that are really pink. That's when I know that like my levels are getting high, so I need to be more mindful of myself. So subconsciously my body gravitates towards pink when I'm stressed out. And this right here is going to be so cool.
Yeah,
I
was just thinking the same thing.
That's so cool. So yeah, it's a conscious choice. I don't really work in color a lot with my language. I work in reflections, so like mirror surfaces, black, white because text, and occasionally red. But if I'm making a lot of pink work, then I know I'm going crazy. So, and I mean, I wanted to reflect that in this body of work, and also like the general theme of 2020 is we're all going crazy.
2020 is pink.
2020 is neon pink. Let's be real. Let's be real. So that's why the pink.
The response was definitely true.
Definitely.
An anxious time, an anxious
Yeah.
color.
So when you're writing like this, is it kind of more automatic writing?
Yes.
Okay. So you're not really like writing specific phrases or words. You're kind of writing just as things come to mind.
There's a question one of the students had about, that relates to what Adam just said, about like, the way people change language, the way language has changed over time and speech has changed over time. Do you think about that at all? Or are you always in the here and now? Or are you thinking about, language from the past as well, or?
I am always thinking about the hand that makes the language, right? Like, so my handwriting, when I'm doing this, it's like this, but you recognize it as writing. Your handwriting, when you're writing something, looks completely different, but we recognize it as handwriting. And like a lot of people are like, oh, I can't draw, but every time you pick up a pencil or a pen, you are drawing language that you learn to draw. And some people draw language really neatly and beautifully and pristinely, and some people draw language like an explosion happened. So I like to think about how like the shape of characters change over time. Like, one C looks like this, or like the two different A's, so it's like the serif A and the sans serif A. Like, how did that change over time? And what's that going to look like in 50 years when all we do is text to each other and we actually have to write the characters, That's what I like to think about. And I also like to think about like different languages and how, like the same, if we're using the common 26-letter Greek alphabet, how many languages use that alphabet and how many languages use these same 26 characters to build completely different letters and words than we've ever had in our, dialect, which doesn't make any sense. In our, I don't know, the way we use language and the way we shape letters and the way we build words. It's interesting to think about all the different ways that can happen.
Well, I know that you also like focus, the concept of your work also kind of relates or focuses somewhat on semiotics, sign theory, and how and what is intrinsic to sign theory is that signs or letters are arbitrary because they mean different things in different languages or to different people. So does that kind of, I don't know. I mean, I'm somehow drawing a connection between that idea and you're using kind of automatic writing. You're kind of playing into the fact that it's arbitrary.
You're making such good connections for me. Thank you. So much easier when other people do it. Yes. Yeah. I mean, the language has to take the format of something, right? Like, the language is just the means of communication. So, however it looks like, we would have, in theory, evolved to have language. We just happen to evolve to have this language. So, it's fun to think about parallel timelines where like language is completely different. Like we're making fart sounds with our mouths to communicate ideas, and how does fart language look when it's written or whatever. But yeah, like it's I think, the connection between automatic writing is like the idea is going to get out, right? Like, is it going to be legible? Cool, but it's going to get out. And you'll like have some visual representation of the idea, whether or not it's something that makes sense to you or to the person looking at it is
Absolutely.
another idea. Like it's not an inherent connection to me sometimes for it to be legible. It's about the visual impact that the language has when I'm drifting into this very illegible space.
Could you talk a little bit about how you kind of approach the idea of automatic writing? And there's some students interested in that as a technique or an exercise, maybe how you started with it, or?
I started with it more first thing in the morning. Like it would be one of the first things that I did in the morning. I would have like a huge sketch pad, and obviously I like really bold line making tools. So I'd use like a graphite stick and just like try to do a journal entry on this big piece of paper where I'm just letting my hand go. And I started with my non-dominant hand. So I started with doing it with my right hand and just like thinking through the shapes that your hand makes when you're writing. I would do it first thing in the morning and just look at the results and say, okay, well, yes, I guess, I don't know. But I would keep just like till that big sketch pad was done, to like a month of it to really get the idea in. And then, I would switch it up even further. I would try to do it with my eyes closed. I would switch to my dominant hand, but with my eyes closed, like all these different activations and variations of like connecting language from your brain to the shapes your hand can make. And I mean, ultimately, it would be really cool to like wake up in the morning, roll out of bed, and like have this giant wall to work on and just keep doing it over and over and over until you make it to some cool, happy place where you're like, yes, I've done it. I am automaton. But yeah, that's how I start with it. That's my entry approach. It's just every morning, non-dominant hand, dominant hand, just trying to do a journal or a diary entry of just like thinking through, yesterday was weird, I had this strange dream, need to get oranges from the grocery store, like just structuring it that way, but in that early morning twilight state of being. And then, I don't know, I guess you could try it on the flip side with like extreme exhaustion. Like once you've pushed yourself past the point of no return, like you've been up for 48 hours straight or something, then trying to do automatic writing and like seeing what that connection is from like just rested to completely exhausted. Those are ways in. I don't know. It's not like some super high cerebral act. It's just let your hand do the writing. Think in your brain and let your hand do the writing.
And do you find yourself connecting like meditatively with your subconscious and things like that? Like that's kind of the psychology, I guess, of automatic writing. Have you noticed things like that too? Or
I haven't been able to ever make it to that place, but I think it's because I'm always thinking of it as practice, like as practice in my hand. But I'm sure if I was like approaching it from like just a wave pool for my brain, like this very gentle rolling motion for my brain, I could see how you would find meditation with that.
mm-hmm. Or maybe you've already reached nirvana and you just don't know, right?
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I'm in nirvana right now. It's great. I'm having a great time. I love it here. I'll send you guys an e-bike.
I thought I saw one question somebody posted about how you feel about silence.
Ooh.
I don't know. I mean,
Is that like a rub at us, or
I-
talking too much?
I don't know, maybe.
Oh.
But I tried to find it and I couldn't find it in the list of questions. But I thought that, That's an interesting idea, though, and maybe an interesting thing to talk about in terms of, you know, does silence play into your thought process, or does it have an appearance at all?
I have never really worked in silence. Like, I've never made work in silence. I always have some sort of input stimuli going for me, but that's just because, you know, my brain can't. Silence is too big for me. Like, there's too much unknown in silence. So I have to have like some little bit of grounding sound before I drift off into the massive unknown. But the beauty of silence kind of, I guess, lives in the introspection moments that the exhibition creates. Like, you have these opportunities to be silent within yourself, within the space with this work, and let that be, you know, an opportunity for meditation or, you know, again, reflection, reflect in silence. I don't know, silence isn't something that I like seek out actively or.
There's a question about punctuation too. Is punctuation part of this? It seems there isn't punctuation.
Who asked that question?
Karina.
I don't know. Okay, I thought it was come from someone else. Punctuation. I really only like question marks because periods just indicate a pause, and a comma also indicates a pause. So to me, they're just like soft pause, hard pause. And in my stream of consciousness, I don't really like acknowledge either of those things. But I do like question marks because it is the, you know, opportunity to think of an answer. Like, it poses a question to you. The question mark is the, like, this means this is something to think about. And I like the notation of like, this is something to think about, as opposed to full statement. End of sentence. So I only really like question marks. I don't really use punctuation other than question marks.
There's just a comment that Adam doesn't have to hold the camera, but I think you should.
I need the exercise.
That's what
as
I-
much exercise as this is. Yeah.
Another question. Do you just stick to English, or do you use other language in other languages?
So I was telling Adam and Matt yesterday, thank you, that I studied a lot of languages in my younger years. So at one point, or throughout the course of my life, I have studied, not to any great level of fluency, but I have studied Spanish, German, Mandarin, a little bit of Japanese, and Russian. And so I like languages a lot. Like, my initial interest in life, like in middle school years, was photography and languages. And so I don't really use any other languages only because I'm not fluent in them. So I don't know all the subtleties of certain languages and like what some words mean in that culture. So I'm just sticking to, you know, what I am familiar with, which is English. But I do have a great appreciation for other languages. Like, I think any way that two people communicate is really, really beautiful and interesting, so long as it's, you know, not hurtful towards each other.
No, it's interesting how beautiful another language can sound if we don't know its meaning or
Right,
context.
yeah,
I mean, it could be really
yeah.
hateful language, but it just, because it sounds different.
Sounds so good.
Yeah. So you can have kind of an aesthetic response to different sounds of language that you're not really.
Is the study of languages, is that where you kind of connected your art with the writing and script, or did it come out of were you always like a journal, you know, were you always the type of person to do journaling and stuff like that, or?
You know, so I initially, early years, like high school, approached my art making through photography. I was the daughter of a shutterbug, or the granddaughter of a shutterbug, I should say. And so I was really comfortable behind the lens, like finding and framing out these moments. And I was also, it was an opportunity for me to like really investigate people, because I had this purpose now to be talking to someone. Like I'm like looking for something within people. That's what I really enjoyed. And I should say, like, I'm terrified of people. So like it allowed me into a space where like I had a reason to connect with this person, and then I could have a conversation with the person. And then I understood that I liked the conversation. Like I'm more interested in what they had to say than like what they look like. So I did my freshman year at SCAD, studying photography. Thought it was cool. There's also a lot of money, and I didn't feel any smarter once I left. So I transferred to App State, and there I was doing photography, and the criticism that I was receiving around my work wasn't necessarily like what I was trying to communicate. Like there were just new perspectives that I hadn't really encountered that were reading things into my work that was just like way off for what I was doing. And so I started thinking about like, how can I direct the narrative for this image? And I was like, oh, right, Dwayne Michaels, obviously. I can just write on it, and then you can't disconnect this language from the image. So I did that for a while, and then I realized that I could do so much more with just the language. Like, if the visual focus is the language, then there's no way they can ignore what it's saying, because we're fortunate enough to be literate people, and we communicate through written language. So like, let's make our art written language so that you definitely know what it says and you can respond to it however you want. But at the same time, I'm able to say what I want to say in the work, and the response then to me is less
Ambiguous, yeah.
Yeah, or it's just like it's less important,
Okay.
which sounds mean, rude, but it's like I said what I wanted to say, and that to me is freeing because I said what I wanted to say. And I'm happy to have discussions about like what you think it is, but I know for a fact that I said what I wanted to say, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So
Yeah.
then like the aftermath and the conversations that come after, like having said what you want to say, can inform new work and new pieces based on this connection you're having with other people because you're communicating through language. I don't know, it's just super cool to me.
So kind of getting rid of all the things in your work with the photography that you thought were superfluous, that
Yeah.
were maybe, you know, taking people in different directions. It narrowed things down and gave you more of a direct
Yeah, but I
line.
mean, at the same time, like, it's still so ambiguous that people can take different directions out of it. Like, you know, it's concrete in that it says, what are you willing to do? It's concrete in that those are the symbols that one would put together to communicate those words in the English language. Like, that is a concrete understanding. Now, whatever it makes you think of in the process of reading or looking at this work is a whole new thing. So, you know, I'm happy to have that conversation with whoever is willing or interested in having that conversation, because they have to respond to this question to think about it. So like, this is point A, and your brain has to come up with point B, unless you're just like, I read that, I'm moving on, which is also completely valid. I don't know where that was going. I like making work that makes people think, and I also like work that makes people sort of have conversations within themselves about like just life or their surroundings, or possibly the experience of others that don't look like them or that don't have lives anything similar to theirs. Just like thinking, like bottom line, just thinking is what I'm interested in.
Nice. yes. So there's a question just like logistically about the mediums that you choose, like how, like, what, right now you're using a lot of the, like you talked about in the show, the preparation for this show that you were working with the Fab Lab and using a lot of the vinyl cutting and stenciling as part of it. You talked about mirrors. Yeah, what are some other, you know?
I think I gotta say, like, my favorite thing is like a good graphite stick, like a good oil stick. I really, really love how you can get a quick, bold line out of it, because sometimes when I'm doing this, my hand moves really, really fast. And so I haven't really found like the perfect marker that doesn't sketch out or bleed when I'm moving super fast. Once I find that, it's over. It is over. But yeah, I like neon colors. I like colors that fluoresce a lot, because there's an opportunity to like work in that conversation of it under blue lights that changes, you know, its visual appearance. And there's like a conversation of like, what's projected on you changes what you look like, and you know, how do you exist within those things? And that's like a bigger conceptual piece. I love a good cheap pad of watercolor paper and a graphite stick. I've never done any spray painting or like any sort of aerosol work, but that does interest me. I like working on plexi because it's reflective. I like reflective surfaces a lot. Yeah. A good trip to the hardware store really sets me alive.
So there's a question too about, you know, it looks like today you're writing in cursive.
Oh, is it cursive?
Well, I could be wrong about that, my apologies. But what about like in terms of the choice of, or how you built this particular gesture that you're doing today in the script? Like, do you find yourself studying different fonts? I know we talked about Comic Sans.
Yeah.
You know, your love of Comic Sans.
Gotta love
That's-
Comic Sans.
But
But
is that like part of the research for you, like kind of exploring different fonts and type and?
Yeah, so like I developed my brain in college to be like the nemesis of a graphic designer. So like anything a graphic designer would do, what happens if I do the opposite of that? So but with it, I know I made great friends. I made great friends doing it. But then I've also honed that mentality into like my own understanding of graphic design and my own understanding of typeface and things like that. So this pink writing is kind of more of my handwriting, like just my general handwriting. There are different versions of it that are, like I call them italics, you know, it's more of a slanty gesture, and there's, you know, like very neat separated letters. But I learned to write in cursive when I was a younger child, and I slowly like evolved my own handwriting out of cursive, so it's both. It's like script and print at the same time.
Yeah, that's the way mine is too.
And I think it's, I mean, I don't think my handwriting is like super interesting, but I like the gentleness of the curves that cursive allows, like instead of these like hard stopping motions of print. So when I do these things, I try to tend towards to that scripty, nice flow. It just feels nice.
Yeah, yeah, and the letters flow.
And they connect, and they create these rounder shapes that are apparently great opportunities for drip. Was not planning on drip being a big part of this piece, but look where we are now.
I think it's great.
Yeah, I love it. I totally love it. This is like another act of surrender. I wanted to fight the drips. Remember that? And now I've just accepted the drips as part of it. And now I know how to use the drips to my advantage.
And the drips are just another part of 2020 that you just.
The drips are just another part of 2020.
So there's a question about like legibility. Is it always in your work that there's portions that are like with this that you're working on, there'll be the stenciled letters, even when you remove them, that are probably going to be more legible right away, and then the script that you're doing almost, you know, as a kind of textured layer or you know, more gestural layer. How do you think about that as the artist between the legibility and then the illegibility of the script?
So I think of legibility as like an opportunity to create visual noise, sort of. Or I think of illegibility as the opportunity to create visual noise. They don't always exist in tandem, like they don't always exist next to each other either. More often than not, it's one or the other, or something that's legible that is sort of getting skewed to the point of illegibility, but you can still read it. Maybe this isn't the first piece I've done like this, though. And I think it's something that I am interested in, learning to communicate those two elements. And I mean, anytime, like I'm teetering on the edge of graffiti, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I have no graffiti skills, I have no like spray can skills, but like the idea of like this big bold language that has more of a graphic element to it and like a visual impression element rather than a legible element is kind of like the same idea that I'm sort of working with.
Well, and just making a mark, right?
Right.
In some senses is just a graffiti or a graffito, right?
Yeah.
But the idea of like street art versus your art is something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. I don't consider myself a street artist. I don't, no shade, have no interest in, you know, tipping my toe into that water. But yeah, I think it's graffiti art is like cool stuff. Like that is high concept. Like that's evolving this idea but to like the highest visual impact level possible. And that's crazy. And I feel like I'm still just a little too married to what it says to like take it to that level.
To give it away like that?
Yeah. I think I'm still just a little too interested in language to just let the language explode all the way into illegibility or like this very beautifully designed mark. Like I appreciate it and I think it's stunning. I love it. But for me to do that, I think that's, I'm always going to stay in the appreciation realm of that. But who knows, maybe like in 10 years I'll evolve into true madness in this post-apocalyptic world. I'll be like the world's best.
You'll be riding trains and yeah.
Yeah, like maybe that's my future. Maybe that's where we're going after here.
So we're coming close to the kind of time, like we're past, I think. We're go to 12:05 and we're already 10 minutes past. So
I mean, I'm happy to be doing
let's
this.
see. Yes. So we'll keep running it, but if people need to take off from the webinar, we'll keep running it a few more minutes. If there's more questions and people need to stay on, I know that Shelley's class has a little echo there. I know that Shelley's class ends at 12:05, I believe. So if anybody needs to take off, and we'll stay on a few more minutes if anybody has more questions or wants to, wants me to run something by Renee that I might have missed, let me know. Thank you guys, and we'll work out all the kinks. Thank you guys for sitting in on this first Friday lecture series. Next week will be Jonathan Keats and Mark Reynes, our sculpture professor, will be monitoring. So there's a question about what you are literally writing on the wall right now. Are you writing specific words or phonetic sounds?
There are words in there. There are like things that I'm thinking of while we're talking about all these other things. If you came in here and stared at it long enough, you could probably find yourself a phrase or two. But honestly, like I know that they're coming in my hands, but I couldn't tell you what the last thing I just wrote was.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So it's like really connected to that immediate gesture. That's really interesting.
It is within, as long as my hand is shaping that word, I know what the word is. Like the second I finish a line and pick up the pen and walk away, it's like, I have no idea what I just wrote. There's a 2020 in there.
See, it's so good.
So good.
Okay, let's see. Dustin's wondering about Jenny Holzer. You mentioned her as one of your influences. What distinguishes, I think what he's asking is what distinguishes like the idea of your personal language to a narrative as opposed to someone else's language and narrative. So do you see those two things as distinct in your work? Are you kind of absorbing them all?
I definitely make work from a personal place, and then I make work from a more general, like, aura of everything sort of place. I don't know if that's what he's asking. Like, there's a clear divide between personal narrative and me collecting language. Usually when I'm collecting language and refurbishing it, it's part of a concept.
Mm-hmm.
So more abstracty things where the language is the texture, like in this situation, is I'm more likely to use personal, like write from a personal voice and a personal place, just because the message isn't as important as the visual impact. So usually when I am adopting language or working from found sources, it's the message that I'm communicating with those found sources that's important. So usually that is a more legible body of work, because that's trying to like, these people are saying this thing about this thing, so let's think about what these people have to say and why they feel like they have to say it.
Mm-hmm.
Is usually like when I'm working from a found language place.
So I think, yeah, one of the things this student was wondering is with an artist like Jenny Holzer, where, the message is, everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
She's really trying to,
Yeah, I really admire it.
yeah. So that makes sense. I mean, that yours is connecting the language and message in kind of, she can be an influence, and like you said with the graphic design, you're almost kind of working in and against that idea of a direct message.
Yeah. I think Jimmy and I are kind of on the same wavelength in that, like, make the language unignorable so that you have to confront what it says. Like, I feel like that's always kind of her vibe, is like, put this here, and you have to confront this and deal with this. So I think we're similar in that way. I'm not as familiar as I would like to be with a lot of her concepts behind her work. I really only know them from like a visual impact point. So I'm gonna buy a book on her and read that. But yeah, I've always been in love with just how brash her work can be, like how, like, I am projecting these words in light on the Guggenheim. You have to deal with this. You have to deal with my voice. And I think there's something like really beautiful and really like strong and determined about that. And I'd like to, you know, make it to the point, or I'd like to find the message to me that is,
That you want that
That, like,
confrontational, yeah.
yeah, like that level of confrontation is necessary for the work. And I haven't found anything where I think that like that big of a punch in the face is the answer.
Yeah,
I don't know. I mean, there's lots of things that I feel like should be said in the punch in the face, but I'm not sure that that's the best way to get people to understand the ideas that would be being punched in their face.
right.
Yeah.
Well said, well said.
But for, what is it, for fun with money and whatever?
Mhm.
Is there a certain work of D'Angelo Diaz that you would encourage? Because I put that down as one of your influences too. Is there a particular work you kind of draw people's attention to, or a particular
I
work
would
that
say-
inspired you?
Yeah, I would say any opportunity you have to see him perform
Yeah.
is really what, just like having him say words and letting it wash over me, and with the power with which he says those words from that stance, like his language is grounded in his speech and moves through his body in a way that like really allows me to connect to it. I don't know, that doesn't really make like a lot of sense. I know it sounds crazy, but like
No, I think it's true. I mean, I've seen him perform
like
too.
if
Yeah,
you ground
it's really
yourself, you also ground yourself the way that he grounds himself, and let that language just like hit you in the face and just wash over you. It's just a whole new experience. Especially for me, like it automatically takes me to the place of like I have to respond to this, which is why I love having him as a friend, watching him perform, usually like maybe within a week I have an idea for new work. Like he's I don't know, he's like he vibrates so strongly with his passion behind his language that it just inspires thought. It inspires thought in me, and it inspires thought in all the people who also hear him.
And so do you and Dia still have the exhibition at Free Range? Right?
Yes,
Is it still
yes.
on view?
That is still up until, I have no idea.
It's up right now.
It's up right now.
The people
So,
should go see it. It's a really great show.
yeah, please be socially responsible, wear a mask, and head out to Free Range, and enjoy a nice beer outside and look at the show.
When did that go up? Recently. Okay.
Recently, yeah, maybe 2 weeks or
Yeah, it's a good spot. We were out over the summer. It's a good spot for during the pandemic.
Yeah,
Easy to stay.
it's
safe,
definitely
yeah.
like a great environment to go be in, especially if you go like right when they just open in the early afternoon, and it's starting to get like a little cooler outside. It's beautiful out there. Free range, get them out. Any double IQ they have if you're a victim age.
So there's one question about supporting your art, buying art, supporting your art. Where would you direct people to your website, to Goodyear, to?
Yeah, you can definitely visit the website. There are some smaller like pieces that I've made that are on there for sale. I would recommend you just message me on Instagram. Or reach out to Goodyear. Either way, they kind of both come back to me.
And is your Instagram Renee Cloud?
No, why would it? That's so boring.
I know, I'm sorry, I don't understand it.
That's what mine is.
So boring. No, my Instagram handle is Nathan Knows Better.
That's who you are, okay. Nathan Knows Better on Instagram, okay.
There's a long.
So that's, yeah, it's easy to connect, okay.
Totally. There's a long story behind it, but once I printed it on my business card, I'm like, all right, this is my branding for the rest of my life.
Nice.
Yeah,
I don't really like, it seems ridiculous, but, so I acted as sales and collective manager for Goodyear Art, so anytime you want to buy art from Goodyear, let it go now. And I love selling work, like that's one of my greatest joys is like seeing people take home this new piece to adorn their home office, whatever it is. And also like being able to pay the artist for someone taking home their work to, like that exchange to me is really super beautiful and like always exciting. I don't care whose work I sell, it's just like, yes, I sold art. Like an artist is being paid for the labor that they've made. That being said, like, I'm really bad at selling my own art because I just like, I connect so deeply to the concept that like the monetary value of it doesn't make any sense to me. So like, how much is this piece? I'm like, well, it's the idea of these things. So however much this idea is worth to you, I guess. And that goes back to like me always asking the question of like, what is it worth? Like, what is the value of X, Y, Z? Because to me, like evaluation systems are really weird and wild. And so like self-value, like is it saying that I have low self-esteem if I don't price this in the millions of dollars, or is it saying that I'm a reasonable person that understands that money doesn't really mean anything and it's this mutual contract between two people? And so like, why can't you skip the mutual contract between two people and I exchange you this thing that makes you happy, and in return you give me the happiness of you having the thing? Which is why I'm very prone to just be like, do you want this? Do you like it? Do you want this? And I know it freaks people out, so I mean.
No, that's good.
Well, we should also, you mentioned Goodyear. I mean, we should
Yeah.
also give a shout out to Goodyear Arts. And so, you're a Goodyear collective artist. And so, Goodyear has the collective, which they're all artists who have had residencies at Goodyear.
Yeah.
And I mean, Goodyear is a really great kind of grassroots community arts organization that does, I mean, they have, they provide studio spaces and resources for local artists, but they also have some really great exhibitions in the gallery space,
Yes.
really fun events.
Yeah,
I mean, it's a really great spot to go and meet people in the arts community.
absolutely.
And you're kind of the third artist that last year before all the craziness started, I mean, we were talking with Goodyear about, establishing this kind of, partnership between the UNCC Galleries and Goodyear and showcasing their collective artists and providing, an opportunity for students to engage and interact with those artists who are in their backyard to kind of maybe get a little professional advice, but also, to provide kind of a direct inlet into the Charlotte art scene.
Yeah.
And, once things are kind of back to whatever we want to call normal, everyone should check out Goodyear. And I mean, it's also a really great place for students to get involved, meet people, but also, really get involved in your local arts community.
Yes, I think you should definitely come visit us and come tell us, that we're doing a great and or terrible job.
There's the fundraiser in October.
There is a fundraiser in October.
Yeah.
I don't know as much as I should about that, but
It will be advertised.
it will be advertised.
And socially distant and pandemic appropriate.
Yes,
Yeah,
we are crossing all our T's and dotting all of our I's. You won't be in any danger, we promise. It's going to be a fun experience. Goodyear, the reason why I love Goodyear so much is that it gave me community, and it continues to give community to anyone who wants to be, a part of it. I had my residency with Goodyear in late 2016, and I was a year out of the undergraduate program at that time. And so I had spent a year outside of art. Like I had spent a year in the real world, and it sucked. It was so sad. It was so depressing. it was hard. It was really, really hard. And then, you know, I was lucky enough to receive an invitation to apply, and then I received a residency. And from that point on, like, it's like, okay, there are people in Charlotte who are interested in the same things that I am. There is an opportunity for others to learn about this space and, you know, be in fellowship with other artists through this program. And I think it's awesome. I don't know.
It is.
It's just such a great place to be, and it breaks my heart that, you know, the pandemic has caused us to miss almost a year of such awesome programming, especially in a time where I feel like the fellowship would really, really, really be needed to just feel any bit of normal during this time. But, you know, we got to be smart and responsible first so that we can have many great times in the future.
So just put that, you know, put that on your radar
Please
in
do.
your arts.
Please.
Any final thoughts before we sign off?
No, I'm learning now that this pink is not the same as the pink that I've been using.
I thought that was intentional though.
Oh.
It's like a little more transparent.
No, not at all. So I got to work on that pink.
Thank you so much, Renee.
Yes, of
Yeah.
course.